from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. It's Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music, a practical web series for all music educators, embedding SEL into music education. On this episode, we are proud to introduce your social emotional learning support team. We welcome Jonathan Grantham, Elise Hackl, Yorel Lashley, Shawna Longo, Darlene Machacon, Bobby Olson, and Juan Carlos Tavares. Please welcome our host of Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music, Scott Edgar.
Hi, my name's Scott Edgar, and welcome to our next episode of Teaching Social and Emotional Learning Through Music. Folks, today's a special one. Today's the day that we're going to introduce you to the SEL support team, sponsored by Music for All. This is a place where we have brought in the best and brightest of the folks who are actually doing SEL on the ground. These are the folks who are the pioneers, who are trying this and learning what works, learning what doesn't work, and inventing their way forward. So we brought this entire team together today to say, we're here to help. If you are trying to do SEL in your classroom because it is something that you value, something that is important, something that your district is telling you that you need to do, but you're still not quite sure exactly how to do it, folks, I'm always here, but these are the folks who are working with the K-12 students day in and day out. So our entire purpose of this episode is for you to get to know them. They're going to have a valued spot on the website, and you can click on any of them, and they're going to have their emails there, and they'll welcome your questions. They'll welcome to just dialogue with you about what this looks like. These are the special folks who are there to support us in our initiatives moving forward. So without further ado, we're going to kick it off and get to know this team. So Yorel Lashley, if you could just take a few seconds and introduce yourself and tell us what social and emotional learning means to you.
All right. Hi, I'm Yorel Lashley. I'm happy to be here. So social and emotional learning sort of lives in all of my work, has for a long time. I teach, essentially focus on teaching West African, Afro-Brazilian, and Afro-Cuban percussion, drumming, to young people, and was initially envisioned and started that in 2001 in New York City, and then continued it where I now am in Madison, Wisconsin, starting in 2010. But the goal was to teach life skills through music. And back then we weren't talking about social emotional learning as a term, but really we have a habit of renaming old things. So it is now social and emotional learning. But the way that lives for me is that we have very defined what we call pillars of power that I have refined over the years by having students define what that means to them and bringing their real life experiences around these three ideas, or really around what important pieces of learning are for them. And we've defined it to just be three things now. Discipline, which we define as using your energy for good things. Community, which we define in a school context as supporting your own learning and learning of others. And then leadership, which we define as doing the right thing, even when no one is, even if you do it by yourself, and especially when no one is watching. So I build all the lessons in terms of what we actually do through music, build on those concepts and actually utilize them. So we might, for example, always start off saying, well, we might need, for example, for this next exercise, to discipline, because we may need to focus our energy on the work at hand and maybe show community by not talking or distracting others so that we can't learn and so that others can't learn. And so we go specifically into applying the skills to whatever the academic learning is. And it sort of just goes from there. So these things live in all the work that we do all the time, and are also elements of how we provide a safe space emotionally and physically, but also caring and trusting relationships and high and clear expectations and opportunities for connection and real ownership among the young people. And finally, the goal of all this work is to really teach toward youth empowerment. So the critical pedagogy piece of it is something that I try to focus on all the time, so that students are, what starts off as a very teacher-driven process ends with student ownership and them having embraced and seen how they benefit from these life skills and social emotional learning skills that we're developing over time, and then being able to set their own goals around those and also the music that we do in class.
Yorel, spot on. I absolutely love how I hear the integrity in all of this. To do the right thing when no one else is looking. I love that language. But even more so, I love how the focus is on agency, how we can empower our students to really take the next step. We take a step back so our students can take a step forward. Really, really powerful. John, can you talk to us about what it looks like in your band classroom?
Sure, Scott. Pleasure to be here. I have found that I believe that social emotional learning shows up in implicit and explicit ways with our instruction and certainly with our relationship building. And I have this idea that the whole student walks into the room every day, but not always in one piece. And I feel like effective social emotional learning allows for the students themselves to feel a bit more whole when they leave. And through implicit and explicit ways, whether that's community building and mindfulness, questions that we use to prompt discussion student to student, ways that might just generate a sense of comfortability and community within the class within those first 5 to 10 minutes, or things that are embedded within the instruction to create connection and community through the music that we're making. And I just find that by having a lot of tools in my toolkit with the students, they're able to feel like they're building points of contact in multiple ways, in the hopes, like I said, that when they leave the classroom, they're just a bit more whole than when they walked in.
John, the power of talking about the music making process to serve as a glue. If those kids come in pieces and they're able to leave just maybe one more piece. You know, I firmly believe that SEL, we never reach an arrival point. But even if we put one more piece in place through their process and they're able to have the agency to do that, incredible. Elise, can you talk to us a little bit about what this looks like with younger students?
With my students, especially in our adaptive music setting, so remember, these are all students who are neurodiverse. I work with preschool through grade 8, and we truly focus on two things. Those things are ourselves and others. And what I mean by that is in special education, we really focus on life skills and functional skills is kind of the big word right now. But really, those functional skills are the tools that we teach in SEL. With SEL, we're basically giving students the tool set that they need to function and manage in society for them. So that's the first piece. But then that second piece is others. And oftentimes, especially with students who have social deficits or challenges, the ultimate goal is for them to be able to connect to others. So the goal of SEL in my classroom is to first understand and give tools for students to use. Now, oftentimes they already have these skills, it's finding them and utilizing them. And then from there, being able to apply those skills to connect with, participate in community with others.
Elise, the more I talk to Maurice Elias from Rutgers, he uses some words that just align so beautifully what you just said. Can we teach our students to encounter the tests of life instead of a life of tests? And I think oftentimes when we're doing SEL or music, we go in and assume that all of our students are going to be able to respond to it in the same way. And what I have learned so much from you over the time that we've interacted is that that can't be. And not to put too fine a point on it, folks, but Elise called me out and said, hey, Scott, no, you little bit ableist here. You need to kind of come in and you need to approach this from a different perspective. And if you're wanting to dig a little bit deeper into this, please make sure you check out the episode with Alice Hammel on this series about how we can adapt SEL for diverse populations. Bobby, can you talk to us a little bit about what this looks like in the high school choir classroom?
Yeah. So I really came to SEL strategies a few years ago when I was feeling totally overwhelmed with all of the challenges that were facing my students, and seeing students dealing with anxiety and depression, and I just felt like I didn't have any tools to help or know what was my job versus not my job. And so starting to explore SEL and use SEL activities really helped me discover tools that I could use. And what I saw is it helped kids become more self-aware and more socially aware. And that led to better decision making. And it was not always a fast process at first, but I think about where my choirs were 4 years ago versus now, even in an extremely tough time. And I think that the SEL strategies just help us navigate tough waters a little easier. So that looks different in every choir, in every class, and every group of kids. but I think keeping the focus on, how do we use our music to instill those self-awareness, social awareness, and decision-making strategies is really important.
And Bobby, exactly what you just said, it's perfect. You and I have had a similar journey with SEL where we start to think about, what is my role? Well, it's not a counselor, but I really want to do something to deepen my students' skills in these areas. And Bobby, you do it so well integrating social and emotional learning into the music, so it's not one more thing. Juan Carlos, we see the boom whackers in the background. We love them. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like in your world?
So hello, thank you for having me. My name is Juan Carlos, and I teach the little ones. And I worked at a school where we had values. And two of the values that really stuck to me were community and choice. And I took these values with me, and I still use them in my classroom now. And, my students come with just so many different emotions. And for me, I have the power of giving them a voice in my classroom. And I think that's so important. And then just giving them a sense of belonging. We all come from different places, and it's so important for my students to know where they come from, especially, where their ancestors come from. Because I'm Dominican, and I didn't grow up exploring my culture. And now I feel like it's my job to help my students find their ground and their sense of belonging in my classroom. And the power of community, like a lot of you have been saying, and mindfulness, this is so important for our students to really, really know who they are.
Juan Carlos, you're hitting on something that is huge in the field of SEL right now, called transformative SEL. That right now, especially when we're navigating so many challenges in terms of racism and in terms of divide and bigotry, transformative SEL really hits at three key skills that you just nailed right on the head: identity, belonging, and agency. And those three things just seem like they're living in everything that you're saying. So exciting. Darlene, you also work with the littles. Let's explore what SEL looks like in your world.
Hi everyone, I'm Darlene. I teach TK through 6th grade elementary music and 5th and 6th grade choir. I see SEL as a means to teach the whole child. A statement that I've been really resonating on lately is by Franklin Willis: "We are more than a music teacher." And I think of the many times where I would not teach music in the music classroom setting, but those were the moments that I was able to connect with students, see more of their humanity, and for them to see a little bit more of my humanity. So I've been really reflecting on how I can continue to teach the whole child, even through the struggles of distance learning, which is what I'm doing right now. So I see even our asynchronous lessons as more than just, okay, what's the difference between a TA and a TT? But I think, okay, where can we go beyond that? How can we better get to know people from other cultures, people from other countries? Because I feel that for people who maybe have gotten so used to their whole routine of, oh, I just teach music, then there's this stigma of, oh, SEL is just another thing I have to do. It's not related to music because all you do is breathe, or all you do is talk about emotions. But that stigma has to go away because, again, we are so much more than that. And especially with the National Core Art Standards, it's not just by 1st grade they have to know the difference between beat and rhythm. It's not even that anymore. It's about, okay, are they able to create? It's so much deeper than that. And I feel that SEL goes well into how we can prepare students for 21st century skills.
Darlene, I love it. And thank you for bringing up Franklin. Franklin is a new friend of mine and doing some great work in Nashville, but he's the epitome of someone who doesn't call it SEL, but he does SEL. It's part of everything that he does. And as I look at the panel here, so many of you have started this journey with just that. It's like, I kind of do this, but how do I put it back in that SEL oven and really bake it into a way that it can be truly meaningful? And Shawna, to make that truly meaningful, I think our friends in New Jersey, where you're from, have really taken this to the next level with selarts.org.
Yes, we have. I'm super proud of the team here in New Jersey and the work we're doing with SEL and the arts. I'm a K1 music teacher right now, but in my 20 years, I've taught it all from band to orchestra to marching band, preschool through 12th grade, admin side. I've kind of done every aspect of music education. And so part of my role in the school I'm in right now is I'm also an arts integration specialist. And so with all these tools that I have in my kit, I've always felt it was so important to make as many connections for the students as possible. And so by connecting different content areas, and I always knew that, when I speak of connections, arts teachers, music teachers, we have a different kind of connection with our students. And people really didn't understand that or didn't know. And I'm like, well, SEL tells us why, because this is embedded in what we do, and getting that intentionality and having it be sustained is what really brings it into a real kind of passion within as a music teacher. So for my little ones, I have two things I ask them every day. What did you learn and did you have fun? And as long as they can tell me one new thing that they learned and they say, yes, they had fun, my day is complete. And so, because I think that that's what's most important, that they're having fun while learning and exploring who they are, because I'm grateful that I know where they need to go throughout the years in the program, that I can really kind of focus on that foundation and get them comfortable with themselves and others around them to be able to really become great individuals, not just musicians, individuals.
Absolutely. We have to care about our kids far more beyond the content. And that's why we're all doing what we're doing, why we're here today. Intentionality, embedded, and sustained. Those are the three biggest things that we can hit home right now to stress. How do you want to make SEL work? It comes down to those three things. But we all understand that right now the challenges that we're encountering as individuals, as teachers, as students, as a society are huge. Very few of us have experienced this type of wave in our life prior to right now. So a key question that I'd like to explore with the panel is, how are you navigating your own social and emotional competence as you're trying to teach this to your students? Because we all know that so many days we get into our classroom and we're already depleted. And I have to be honest with you. The other day I saw something on Facebook where it said, if one more person from higher ed or my administration says, just take care of yourself, I'm going to go crazy. Teachers don't want to be told to take care of themselves right now because the situation that our teachers are encountering is just too much. So this is a really viable question. And I'm not going to say just take care of yourself. But John, if you can talk a little bit about how you're melding your own self-story and your own care with what you're trying to do in your classroom.
Yeah, that's such an important question. And I think had you asked me that a year ago, it would be a different answer. And what I'm finding right now is, just like our students, we show up to our classrooms, virtual or in person, as a whole person, and sometimes we're in parts ourselves. We also carry the baggage and the weight of our own personal challenges and struggles. And I have found that for me, particularly through the lens of remote learning, it's been really, really critical to make sure that the activities that I'm setting up for the students also help to give me the space and time to get set and settled with them. And I'll use mindfulness and breathing as an example. We will do mindfulness or breathing every day. And in our current structure, we see our students twice a week for 70 minutes. And I'm a high school band director, so that's very different than any traditional schedule we've ever had in my 20 years of teaching. And we've decided to prioritize building relations with the students over trying to get through content. And so the mindfulness and the breathing, whether we're doing one or the other each day, have been a landing pad for me. And I do it for the kids, but I also understand that I'm both a passenger and a driver through that. And I have just found that opportunity to take those few minutes at the start of class to connect with how I'm feeling physically and mentally. We talk to the students a lot about mindfulness and breathing are not about achieving a destination or a goal. It's just about recognizing where you're at and being present in the moment with how you're feeling and not having to do anything with that and how freeing that can be. And so those are two activities that have shown up for my students that we're doing in a very different way than we did when we were in our more traditional schedule. The other thing that's really, really critical for me is to make sure that I'm giving myself permission to not feel like I have to do everything I've always done in order to determine what success looks like. And as soon as I was able to dismantle kind of myself from the equation, this took a lot of lifting, right? Like I'm going to kind of figure out how to remove myself from the decisions I'm making around what's best for the kids. And as soon as I took out what was serving my own ego fuel, it became much simpler to see what kind of fell by the wayside. And those are two really significant strategies that I found specific to this year of remote learning as really helpful.
John, I'm going to follow up with that for just a second. So how do you envision that manifesting when we get back to some kind of reality?
That's a good question. I do think in the feedback, I guess I wanted to add maybe a third leg of this process is that we are engaging our students regularly in feedback around how they're doing and what they're getting out of class and what they need more of. And the mindfulness and the breathing keep coming back as things that the kids really, really appreciate. And so in response to your question, we will do and continue to do mindfulness and breathing in a more intentional way. I tended to use it as a gauge to read the temperature of how the kids were doing when we were in person, because you can sense how the students are doing. Like, I think we could use 5 minutes today to do a body scan, do some breathing, but it wasn't always an embedded part of the instruction. And it has become a necessity that we do that this year. And that is something that I think I will keep when we return to more normal times, when that may happen.
I love that you've taken this opportunity to say, you know, the bar that I used to try to achieve, it doesn't exist anymore. It can't exist anymore. That I need to find other opportunities to reach my students. And it's all through reflection. It's all through simply just asking them. So well done. Bobby, I know that you also really bring yourself into the classroom. So can you talk a little bit about how this self-care manifests in your world?
Yeah, well, I've been doing a lot of comparing, which is dangerous, comparing past to present. But I think teaching starts with a good environment. And what it used to be is even if I'm personally in chaos, if the hallways are in chaos, I shut the doors and I teach and I can control that environment. And I think my biggest question to start with is how can we secure our environment for ourselves and for our kids? You know, what are the ways that we give ourselves permission to shut the door? And how do we give our kids permission to shut the door? We are 100% remote and probably will continue to be for a little while. And, you know, dealing with each kid individually on like, what do you need to feel secure in your space, if that's in your room or if that's in a busy kitchen, wherever they're doing their remote learning from. But then I think also, to get ourselves out of the way, we have to frame our mindset a little differently. And I have to remind myself of this every time a class starts every day. But we have a captive audience. And if it's, you know, if it's 4 black boxes on a screen, or if it is, you know, almost all of the kids and they've got their cameras on, like they've decided to show up for the day. And that's a really good thing. That's a gift that we have. And that's a more positive way, I think, to frame it than, not all the kids showed up again. And that has been, I think, really hard for me. But I also think that if we think about like what we are best at as teachers, and then we implement SEL with that in mind, it becomes much easier to implement instead of trying to think, well, I've got this decree from on high on this activity works. Think about like, what is your style? And then how does that blend in with the curriculum you're already using? We've been seeing a lot of, we just have to be positive. And yes, kind of, but it doesn't have to be a rah-rah excited positive. I think that if we are, again, true to who we are and how we are, that our positivity comes through. And if we try and have that mindset, then we can plan better and we can observe what's going on in the classroom better, even if it's remote. And we can reflect better and then make the next day a cleaner and more effective lesson.
And that vulnerability, you know, there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable with our kids. And how we're vulnerable with high schoolers versus how we're vulnerable with kindergartners, it looks very different. But it's okay to say, today's not the best day. I didn't get a great night's sleep. That normalizes that not everyone is showing up with 8 hours ready to go and Zoom fatigue is off the table. And all of that goes to facilitating a safe space, because what do we want out of our music classrooms? a space where students are willing to take risks and to improve and put themselves out there, because in music, we demand vulnerability. You have to put yourself out there. And I think modeling that, Bobby, as you just so eloquently stated, is the perfect way to start. So Elise, I know that in your setting, that sometimes you feel like you're an island, that you maybe don't have enough people to connect with. And this is what we're trying to alleviate right here with this exact panel, is so that you don't feel like an island. But in your setting, how have you navigated that?
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to just what we were saying before. It's that modeling. So when a student is in crisis, what do we expect from them? We expect them to have some sort of rapport with a teacher that has been there, or staff, or whoever it is, to be able to be there to support them. But if we as a teacher are on an island and we're in crisis, what are we going to do if we don't have that rapport, if we don't have that connection, right? If we have a student where something isn't working, we don't expect them to just push through. We expect to have strategies there from other supports. So when you're on an island, it's really important to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to make those connections. And even if it's, hey, I know there's another music teacher that I saw them in a meeting and they had the same question that I did, there's that instant connection. Finding any sort of connection to start that conversation will help us realize we're really probably on an island with many other people. They're just in various areas also trying to find us, or also too scared to admit that they need help. I don't know if you're anything like me. I'm a perfectionist. I don't like to ask for help. It took me a long, long time to actually reach out and extend that olive branch, but the relationships that are formed through doing that is so meaningful, not only on a personal level, but then we can take that into our classroom and we can see, oh, maybe we do have the same student, and we're able to connect about what that student needs. We're able to model for that student, hey, we're going to try this in different ways to see what works for you. And then we're able to do the same for ourselves. And that's a really important piece of it. We can't expect a student to be in crisis alone, and we can't expect ourselves to be in a crisis alone. We need those supports, and being vulnerable is the most important piece of that, being willing to ask for help.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers said that being vulnerable and asking for help is a strength, not a weakness. Absolutely spot on there, Elise. And you know, I think actually some people like their bat caves. Some people like that their music room is in the corner and they don't have to interact. But if we're going to talk about identity, belonging, and agency, we need to branch out. We need to see how music in our music classroom and our music students connect socially with the folks in all of the school. So, Yorel, I saw you got something. Go.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to add quickly, just because as a developmental psychologist, I couldn't let it go past. Just to add to what everyone else has said, that when we model that for students, that level of self-care and awareness and willingness to admit sort of what's going on, and then our struggles and successes as well, then we're also modeling refocusing our minds to focus on managing difficult situations rather than trying to control them. And that's an important way of thinking about it that's super healthy for adults and young people alike.
Yorel, I'm going to actually ask you to dig a little deeper into that, because I think in social and emotional learning, sometimes people think self-control and self-management. And there's a very, very distinct difference. And there's a reason that we call one of the CASEL components self-management and not self-control. And I think one sort of evokes a little bit more of us doing something to the students. Can you unpack that just a little bit?
Sure. And I think, and also just not just doing things to students, but us doing things to ourselves, right? We're often in the situation where we're trying to control ourselves. And sometimes as teachers, we're thinking we're controlling students. But really, as a teacher, I think of it as trying to teach students to manage themselves. So I'm not actually even managing them myself. I mean, technically I am, but I'm also trying to sort of turn over the main agency in that relationship. But even just for us thinking about self, it's super important that if you focus on the issue of control, then, or that as a goal, then often it means suppression, because if you don't talk about a thing or you don't admit a thing, then it is kind of controlled. Whereas when we think about management has sort of the connotation there is that there is acceptance that the thing exists. So if we know we live in a culture where a lot of times we, given our sort of rugged individualist ethos, we want to feel like we have to bury everything. If it's something that doesn't make us feel good and often isn't easy to deal with or is just very difficult, then trying to sort of muddle through and acknowledge that to other people is not easy. So a lot of times people will naturally just, suppress and suffer, and often suffer alone. So I think focusing on the management as the goal, which has within it sort of an acceptance of the fact that something exists. It's not the easiest, or it may be difficult, but it's real, is the first step to sort of being able to figure out how to sit with it and then how to manage it to be something that you can sort of move through in a positive way.
Perfect, Yorel. Thank you. And that serves as, I want to transition here to our next piece. And if anyone has anything to add to that, we'll have time in a little bit if anyone cares to. But Darlene, I want to go to you right now, because I know that you have a lot of thoughts about the difference between being an individual or being part of a collective culture and what that means to how we implement SEL in a way that is authentic for people from varied backgrounds. Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Sure. We were just talking about self-care, and I remember looking up the different ways different countries celebrated self-care, and it truly varied. Like, one country would celebrate this way, they really focused on taking baths, while another country just focused on hiking. And then we all hear, self-care is different for everybody, and it's also important to know the difference between self-care versus self-soothing, but that could be another topic for another day. But I also reflected on my work ethic growing up, and how personally for me it was very difficult for me to practice self-care. I'm Filipino, grew up in Asian family, and a lot of my family environment was just work hard and then you're going to be successful. And sometimes you had to work so hard to the point that you forget about taking care of yourself and resting. And so I reflect back on, several years ago where I would work 7 days a week and thinking, oh no, that's totally okay. But where did that come from? That came from that mindset I had growing up as a kid, that I have to work hard, even if that means I have to not take a day off, or that means I have to work 10 hours a day. Not saying that that's a bad thing, but that was just the environment I grew up on. I think of my families. They immigrated from the Philippines, and they had to work extra hard to be able to provide for me and my 2 brothers. And so that's something I also think of when we transfer self-care to other people, is like, what does it look like for them, but also how come for some people it's difficult for them, like what was their family upbringing to shape their work mindsets. And so tying on to different cultures, something that I've been really focusing on, especially in my specific student population, is the difference between collectivist cultures and individualist cultures. And so another way to think of collectivist cultures is more interdependent, while individualist is more independent. And so just in a nutshell, for independent cultures, they're more about expressing their individuality in that way. But in contrast, interdependent cultures or collectivist cultures, they kind of use their emotions and gauge it with the room. So for example, I think of my student population, which is primarily Vietnamese and Hispanic, which leans more towards collectivist culture. I'll notice that they're a little bit more hesitant to talk about their emotions or share their emotions in assignments, because I can see that they're kind of gauging the room in that way. And it could be partly peer pressure, but I notice that in those cultures, they'll react a certain way if it's going to affect the room immediately. And I think that's something to also be aware of when we talk about emotions in our classrooms, to think, okay, SEL is this, and to think, okay, SEL isn't exactly one size fits all. Cultures have different ways of looking at emotions. So that's been something I've been focusing on and playing around along with.
Absolutely, Darlene. Thank you so much for that, because that's so important for us to realize that not every student, not every culture, and if we are in, one of my favorite high schools here in the Chicagoland area, you walk down the hall and you hear 30 different languages, and understanding that if you're trying to do the one-size-fits-all SEL, it's going to fail epically. And along those lines, Elise, I know this is something that is near and dear to your heart, along with this idea that we can't just put SEL in this one-size-fits-all. Can you talk to us about neurodiversity?
Absolutely. And even in there, it's not just one size. It's not a size. It's the entire size that everybody has bits and pieces of. So really the neurodiversity movement is focusing on the fact that there is not one correct brain. There is not one normal brain. There is not one normal way of thinking. We as humans have various thoughts, various preferences, various reactions. I don't want mayonnaise on my sandwich. I will puke at the sound of it. Sorry for that, everyone. But that's a preference that I have. That's a sensory thing that I have. And that's different for everybody. People may like different flavors of mayonnaise. They might love it. They might, I don't want to talk about it anymore, but you get the idea. So everybody has different reactions. Everybody has different preferences, and expecting that everybody's going to come in with not only that same background, but that same way of expressing that background is just absurd, because we don't all have that same understanding because our brains work differently. So even with cultures, yes, there are different types of cultures, but within those cultures, there are differences among every individual. So for me, in my classroom, it's not focusing on even accepting those differences. It's saying, here are all of our differences. Let's work together to make sure that everybody's understood, appreciated, and feels comfortable bringing those to the table. A lot, and I've said this time and time again, a lot of teachers have such great intentions and say, I want to give my students a voice. I want to give my students a voice, especially my students with differences. They have a voice. They are expressing their voices in many different ways. I have students who will model through pictures. I have students who use communication devices. I have students who, if they need something, they'll grab me and drag me over there. Our students have so much to say and so much to share. It's our job to give them the platform and give them the comfort level to feel able to do so.
Our students have voices. We just need to be aware of how they are voicing them and listen. Spot on. At least every time you say that, it's just like, it's the light bulb that unfortunately I think just needs to go off every single day for so many people, that, saying that, I want to give my student a voice. And you say it so well. They have a voice. It's our job to amplify it. Thank you for that. So we know that our challenges that we're experiencing right now, I started off our time today talking about this. They're extreme. Juan Carlos, can you talk a little bit about how you envision social and emotional learning to serve as a catalyst, as a lever to help us through some of these extreme challenging times?
I'm glad you asked that, because I was just having a conversation with my professor earlier today. We're doing this project on the convoy model and how these relationships and how your interactions are impacted by your experiences throughout your life. And then I was asking the question, well, how can I relate this to my teaching? And so with the pandemic, we're also worried about, it's how is this going to affect our students when they're not interacting in person with each other, at least in my case, where I'm teaching remotely. So, how can I as the teacher continue to allow for my students to interact? So I'm using the gift of movement in these times. And, we have to give our students the permission to allow themselves to move, to express themselves through dance. And, a guided question that I'm always asking is, emotion is the word that describes the feelings that you have. So how can you show your face? How can your face show emotion? So how do other parts of your body show emotion? Right? We have to give our students that time and that permission to move, because it does offer, it's like a stress reliever. And it really, someone mentioned it earlier, the joy of learning, right? And bringing that boost of the sense of optimism and joy in the classroom. So really, how can I continue to build those relationships with my students, but also continue for them to continue, even now with the pandemic, build those relationships among each other?
Yeah, we know that it's going to fail epically if we do anything that is just me trying to do a one-way arrow of instruction delivery. And what I loved about what you just said is you're developing double-sided arrows between your students. You're giving them space to interact and still build those relationships. We know it's not going to be the same, but that doesn't mean we can give up. That means that we still have to try. And I think you've come up with a lot of really strong ways to do that. Shawna, I think that a lot of this really starts to get down to what we believe in as music teachers. So can you talk a little bit about how you envision SEL serving us in this time?
Yeah, for me, I believe that the why we teach is so much more important than what we teach. So, I used to say, I'm not just the music teacher. and that what all we bring to the table as music educators is, and I'm not saying that in a negative connotation, that what, at the core, us teaching music isn't important. Yes, it is important, but we do so much more for our students. And so, especially in these times, for me, I really sat back, and I was fortunate that I was offered the opportunity to rewrite our district's curriculum this summer. And so it couldn't have happened at a better point, because I was already in my brain thinking, I have to do this different. We all have to do this different. And if there isn't a better time for change amongst all the change in our lives, it's now. And so, of course, it wasn't rewritten for right now. It was rewritten for what really, it made us kind of focus in on what are the non-negotiables. Why do we teach, and what do we have to get accomplished in order to reach the standards? And how can we do that in a manner that embeds SEL and really focuses on why did we become music teachers? I didn't become a music teacher to make sure my first graders leave knowing ta, ti, ti, shh, okay? None of us picked those specific things. I became a music teacher because I wanted music to be my vehicle to reach more students, to give them something positive, to give them a way to build confidence in themselves, to be able to communicate, to be able to work with others, to be able to figure out who they are and what they like to do. And even if it's not music, if they figure out that's not what they like to do, okay, great, goal accomplished, okay? Because, we know I know people that are, 40 and haven't figured out what they like to do in life, okay? So for me, it's the why do I go to work every day that I choose to focus on. I'm there for my kids to give them, right now, it's a distraction and positivity in their lives. And I can do that through song, through movement, through music. And while doing that, still embedding these skills of understanding other cultures, understanding who they are, working together, even if we're socially distanced or screens apart, but finding ways to break down these barriers and still get across my love for music, because then they're going to have fun, enjoy music. And also selfishly, it's a little bit of advocacy. If we want to ensure careers in the future for not only ourselves, but the generations behind us, we need to make sure that children have fond memories of that time and how much they gained from it. That's much more than they may forget when they're 40 how to play that B flat concert scale on the clarinet or the hand signals for solfege, but they're going to remember how they felt. And that to me is of utmost importance. And that's where SEL can really, again, I'm going to bring back that embedded, intentional, sustained, can really have some amazing results.
Your friend and mine, Shawna, Bob Morrison, says, change the how, not the what. And I think you've just given us a beautiful why. That is absolutely what is in all of our hearts right now. Elise, I'm going to bring it back to you for just 2 seconds, because I know you can say this so much better than I ever could. Can you just give us a 40,000-foot view idea about this idea of adaptation versus modification? Because I think that kind of gets at the piece we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's the how versus the what, right? Are we adapting what we are doing? Are we making it something different, or are we modifying the pieces that go into it? So we really need to be clear about, are we asking people to change how they're accomplishing the goal or the benchmark? Or are we asking them to change what they are doing? So for my students, we're all talking about ta and titi right now, right? So if the original standard many years ago said they have to sing this rhythm that has ta and titi, well, are we then having to change the goal completely and say, okay, they can't sing ta and titi, so I guess that means that they're going to either have to skip the goal, or we're going to have to just say they can't do it? Or are we going to give them voice output devices that allow them to press the correct one that then sings ta and titi? Are we going to change the goal so that it says they can play ta and titi? So it's all of the differences of the how versus the what.
Spot on. Thank you for that. And I think this all gives us some entry points into SEL as we start to look at self-awareness, identifying strengths, identifying needs, and wrapping our heads around how we can really capitalize on all of our students' strengths. Darlene, I'm going to move to you right now because I know that you have some really strong views that we need to hear, especially now, that there are two really, really strong conversations that are happening around SEL, especially related to how we can address racism. Some people are saying that social and emotional learning, as Yorel was saying, when we treat it as control, is actually another form of policing. But we could also adapt some of the work that we're doing, thinking of it as this transformative SEL, where we can use it in a culturally responsive and relevant way so that we can truly co-learn with our students the root causes of inequity. So can you talk a little bit about your thoughts regarding that?
Sure. I like how Shawna really focused on the why of what we do, because I feel that it doesn't matter if it's your first year teaching, your 10th year teaching, your 30th year teaching, we should always be reflecting on our why. And so since our why is part of our self-reflection, that is also part of our self-awareness, which also ties directly into our adult SEL. So I think, okay, so what does that why even look like in our classroom specifically? Because, we're teachers. We always want to think, okay, that's cool, but what does that look like? Like, give me a specific picture. So I think about, okay, how do we build that sort of trust in our classrooms for in the very beginning? And so if the people we highlight or the pictures we show our students, if they're only, they only feature a certain people group, or we only feature music from dead white guys, how can our students truly feel connected to the music if they can't say, oh yes, I've definitely listened to Bach on the radio the other day, totally, or oh, Bach totally looks like me, yes. So I think it's very important to, yes, even though classical music is important, from the very beginning, we really want to bring in those students and show that connection. And part of establishing that trust in the classroom is also first looking at our implicit bias. And for some of us, maybe even many of us, that can be a little bit uncomfortable. Some of us may want to say, oh no, I'm not racist at all. Like I love everyone. But all of us have it, even if we don't realize, and that's why it's called implicit bias. I've even taken some tests that, I forget the name of the test, but it was where you had to kind of pick an African-American face versus a Caucasian face. And even when I tried to, in a way, fight myself from, I think they're going to try to mess with me here, the results ended up being, okay, you still had a bias towards the African-American face. So I think about even Asian culture, how in the Philippines, have bleaching your skin is totally normal. And so I think even colorism is a huge factor. I think of, okay, what about the skin tone, I should say, of the people I highlight. And I feel that when we talk about composers or we talk about different music, we want to be able to show everyone, not just people who are prodigies or had those different skills. So when it comes to looking now at the CASEL competencies, what's great is that this year I've noticed that they're doing a bit of a shift. They're now addressing issues of equity there. So I feel that nowadays, especially in a time that is being rocked by these issues of Black Lives Matter, we should look at how can we not only recognize those issues, but also highlight that everyone's voice is important in that way.
Bobby, yeah, please.
So I totally agree with these ideas. And something I found really eye-opening, we had some protests of national significance in our area about a month ago. And students had some personal connections to the events. And I have things that I believe, and I see the world in a certain way. And I think that I need to teach kids certain skills to deal with the problems that I see. But one of the best days of remote learning we've had is when I just said, like, how do you guys feel about this? And the kids just exploded with all of their opinions. And it was like trying to ride the wave of where is this going? And it was a little chaotic, but so many kids had problems that they saw that they wanted to talk about and share. And I finally just said, all right, like, give a thumbs up in the corner or the clap emoji if you agree with whatever the speaker's saying. And the screen was just lighting up. And it went from an issue that I was overwhelmed with. I said, hey guys, I don't know how to talk about this. Like, singing our song doesn't seem important today. What do you think about this? And like, getting out of the way was really amazing. And I had to kind of ride with it. And I was a little scared. I was ready to email my principal about like, hey, this got said in class. But I think it was really good. And the kids got to see, oh man, that person thinks the same thing, or I was really worried about that too. And like, acknowledge, it's part of that self and social awareness too, acknowledging what our opinions are, and then giving ways, like Elise was saying, like allowing kids to share their voice, not just, trying to teach them mine.
And more importantly, not silencing them. So not just allowing space, but not silencing. And Bobby, you and I have talked about this a few times, about this idea of needs before notes. And that class was not the time to teach notes, that those students had discussions outside of our classroom. Well, can we teach them in a way that is going to be meaningful, be thoughtful, be there to help guide, and maybe even do it in a little musical way too, to really start to get them to a space where they can wrap their heads around how they and their peers feel. Yorel, I know you've created just such a beautiful construct to help us through with this. Can you tell us a little bit about STAY?
Sure. I guess to put it most simply, I just think that, the work that we're doing around focusing on supporting and developing whole people through SEL really pushes us to stay in a reflection-driven process. And STAY is actually an acronym where for S, we're essentially selecting skills or competencies like goal setting or self-awareness or leadership. And ideally as teachers, by asking ourselves just a few important questions like, what do you and your students and children need to learn or practice? And practice is important because I think we're viewing our classrooms as places to actually practice this stuff and struggle and fail and try again rather than sort of come as finished products. And then for T, we're translating those skills and competencies into languages or routines or plans and community commitments even. And that students understand and that are real for them and that are ideally come from their input and the realities about not only what's important to them, but things that are experiences that they can sort of bring to the work. And then for A, we're creating action. So I feel like good SEL comes to life through student and teacher behaviors and actions that live in everything we do. So that's why for me, I think of the pillars are all action items, right? About doing something, not just believing in something. And then finally, I think for Y, we're thinking and focusing on youth empowerment so that what we do is we eventually try to have it become driven by students to empower them to think critically and to experience the benefits of SEL as a tool for accomplishing the goals that they set for themselves, and not focused on controlling student behavior. So that's the most succinct explanation.
Absolutely, Yorel. I know you have many different manifestations of this at UW-Madison. Can you maybe give us one example of how STAY has enacted in your work?
A specific, you mean an actual experience with young people or something more broad?
Yes.
All right, I'll give a quick one. So there are lots of stories of many different things. I can remember one young person in New York. This is before I was even thinking of it as social emotional learning necessarily. Who I was doing a promotional video eventually to try to talk about just the program that I was running and share it with other people. And I interviewed a number of the students. Well, I didn't actually do it. I had someone else do it. And they asked the students kind of what they got out of the drumming program. And one of the things he said was that he had always struggled with anger management issues and that the drumming gave him an outlet that he had never had before. But that with the instruction and leadership that he got, he was able to use it as a way to sort of express his feelings in a way that he didn't have before and in a way that he couldn't. And then another quick story was there's a group of students that I work with at a school here in town in Madison, where I am now, and they are a youth leadership group, which started as just an after-school group, and they actually get to play assemblies and stuff and present on the drums, and they use the drums to call the school-wide assemblies to order, and they have a very clear leadership role in the school as drummers. And one day they did a presentation without me there because they got to the point where they could do that, and there was some confusion over who was supposed to put the drums away, and students came down and unintentionally left their instruments because there was lunchtime and there was just bad communication by adults that led to some chaos. And so it wound up that 5 students put away instruments for about 40 students. And those 5 students were not very happy when I showed up for rehearsal the next day. And they let me know that, even to the point of tears. And at the end, one of the young people said, you know, and Mr. Lashley, that's just not the community you teach us. And I wanted to hug her. And it was just such a joyful moment. I couldn't show my joy because I didn't want to make her think that I was making light of her righteous indignation and anger at the moment. But it was cool to see that they had owned the concepts as their own and were implementing them. And I think that's the goal that we all strive for.
Own the concepts. Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is the SEL support team, and I think you can see how rich each of our gifts that we're bringing into our classrooms have. And these are the folks who are going to be accessible to you. If you want to reach out to Yorel, his email's on the website. If you want to reach out to Shawna, on the website, shoot them an email. That's what they're here for. I'm going to ask the panel just to leave us with just one quick thought about how can we do this effectively. Maybe a little bit of motivation, maybe a little bit of a shot in the arm. We're all looking for it. Shawna, why don't you kick us off, please?
So at the end of the day, I think everyone needs to trust themselves. Trust that little voice inside of you that's guiding you. And so not to be afraid to try new things and not be afraid to open yourself up and be honest with your students. You know, I try new things all the time, and I tell my kids, even my littles, like before we start, like, this may not work, but we're going to give it a try. And immediately you're opening the door to experimentation, to improvisation, to we're not all perfect, and it's okay to make mistakes, and maybe we don't know where it's going to take us, but the journey's is really where the greatness happens within it. And so I think that being willing to kind of put our egos aside, put what we've just always done and how we've done, don't lose that, but just tweak it and figure out how we can really connect with our students and give them the space to be a part of the journey with us instead of us guiding that journey.
100%. Darlene?
Yeah, in a world of distance learning and hybrid learning, remote learning, whatever you want to call it, I can see how some of us can go in these Facebook groups and go, oh my goodness, look at their fancy Bitmoji room. Oh my goodness, look at all this tech they're doing. And as much as there can be temptation to want to learn all the tech, it's important to know that we don't have to do all the tech things to be an effective music teacher. But also, if our focus is on making sure we have awesome tech, but our content is still suppressing voices of color in our music room, then we're really not doing the best job there. So it's a matter of not only knowing what to prioritize, but also knowing, the tech will come. It is a learning curve for everybody, but I feel like we should continue to be mindful of the material we teach our students. And so there are many resources out there. Google is a wonderful one. So yes, I encourage our fellow music teachers to continue to do the work to pursue anti-racism in our content.
SEL without equity is not SEL. Thank you. Absolutely. 100%. Elise?
And teaching without equity is not teaching as well, because we need to ensure that everybody has the space to be heard. Being vulnerable, everybody has a voice. You have a voice. If you feel that you need to advocate for yourself, that will model for your students that they are able to advocate for themselves. So in this time of, if you're finding yourself on an island, if you're finding you need a little extra support, reach out. You never know who you're going to be able to bond with and to make that connection with. And from there, you can continue to amplify each other's voices to make this the best possible situation for all involved.
I love the word amplify. Thank you. Bobby.
So in my experience, my best days of teaching are always right after my worst days of teaching. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's improved focus, but just an encouragement that the worst days of teaching are awful, right? It's not fun. You make it to the end of the day, but then a better day is next, and it might be your best day. And so we just keep working through it. And yeah, I'm so proud of the work that everybody is doing, and the tenacity that teachers are showing and how they're caring for their students. And yeah, even on your worst day, the best day is next.
Absolutely. Got to go through it. Absolutely. Yorel.
I would just say that I think for SEL is about relationships and care, really at heart. And I think one of the best ways or most important ways that we can show care is to really make time for those conversations, especially the unplanned, inconveniently timed ones, in the same way that we make time for those things with our own children that we have at home. So I'll just leave it at that.
Absolutely. Inconvenience. No one likes it. No one said, please give me a pandemic. But here we are. Absolutely. John.
I have a couple thoughts. One is remember to extend grace and patience to yourself as a teacher through this process. You can only give what you've got. And on any given day, that's going to fluctuate dramatically depending on a number of circumstances. So remember to extend the same grace and understanding that you would give to your students when they're in a difficult spot, and be able to turn that mirror back on yourself. And then the second thing I'd like to leave you with is this idea that try to remember what really gives you fuel as a teacher. And in remote learning, it's been harder for me to remember sometimes what that fuel is, and it's the connection with my students. It's those little moments in between in the cracks of our instruction where I feel the power and the magnitude of just being with other people. And sometimes it can feel hard to know that those moments are available to us in remote learning, but they're there. And you may have to allow yourself permission to deviate from the plan, to throw the plan out, to recreate the plan on the go in order to allow for what gives you fuel as a teacher to show up in your teaching, especially when we're doing remote learning.
Grace and flexibility. Absolutely. Juan Carlos.
I just want to share that this is a journey that we're all going through, right? And it's just really important that students need to know that they matter and that they are cared for, that they are listened to, and showing students that we care about their social emotional well-being is often what builds respect and relationships with them. And really just finding what sparks a light in you as a teacher and how you can help find a light in your students.
I can't think of a better way to send us off. Folks, from the bottom of my heart, this has been an honor to hear you talk for the last hour. This is, as you've all said, just such a challenging time, and you are forging a way through and helping our students do the same thing. So, this is the SEL support team, folks. We're here to help you. On behalf of Music for All, I'm Scott Edgar. Thank you. Music for All's mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through Music for All. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in their scholastic environment. I want to thank the teachers from all over the country who joined us today to create your SEL support team for this heartfelt contribution to the series and enlightening us on how to make music with heart for all of our students. I'd like to thank our national presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Be sure to check out the Yamaha Educator Suite at yamahaeducatorsuite.com. And I'd also like to thank GIA Publications for their continued support. For Music for All, I'm Scott Edgar. Thank you.